Tips and tricks to help improve your terraforming in Minecraft. Minecraft 1.18 brought some of the most dynamic and interesting terrain to the game. Whether it's the mountains that scale all the way from Y64 to the top of the world at 255, or the deep rivers that run in between each biome that can go all the way down to the deep slate level. But sadly though, if you're someone like me, not all terrain is perfect. And sometimes it's nearly impossible to find perfect terrain in an area that you want to build in. At first, terraforming can be a little tough if you're a beginner, but it's really easy to catch on, especially once you understand the basics. And trust me, it's not as hard to do as it looks. All it takes is a little bit of creativity. So today, we're going to be transforming this rolling hills into something a lot more interesting than it is right now. So one of the first things we're going to do is flatten out this terrain a little bit, but we're not going to keep it that way. We're going to bring these blocks back in a little bit later. Something to do before you start terraforming is have a general plan of what you want it to look like. Sometimes you can just jump right into it without any plan and it can come out looking pretty darn good. But other times you might spend a few hours building something and it ends up not looking very good at all. And just like that, the terrain is already looking a whole lot different. We started with something that looked a little bit like some rolling hills, and now we have something that resembles a little bit of a small cliffside, or at least if a cliffside was made out of dirt. But don't worry, that's going to change. Now the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to change every single one of these dirt blocks on this cliffside out with some stone. This is going to change this from looking like a dirt wall to an actual cliffside, and it's a pretty easy thing to do. Now that we have that all finished up, it's pretty clear to the eye that this is a cliffside. And all I did was break one block of dirt and place the stone where I just broke that dirt. Another thing to keep in mind is where the cliffside is going to end. And as you guys can tell, I kind of go down on a gradual incline, not cutting it off too quickly, just until it reaches back to the dirt level. Now that side was pretty easy to do, but this side, on the other hand, has a little bit of a cave. And with something like this, you can either cover it up or you can just include it into the cliff. Now when it comes to smoothing out the harsh edges on your cliffside, there's a few different things you can do. One of my favorites is just bringing in some stone slabs and stone stairs. And when it comes to placing these things, it's pretty easy. Like right here, we have a very, very harsh edge. Let's just place an upside down stair right there, and then maybe a few slabs right there. And already you can see how much nicer it looks. And we can also come right here, place another upside down stair, a slab maybe right there, and another slab. And something I don't love to do, but you kind of have to do every once in a while, is something like this. To me, it's not visually appealing seeing a half block like that, so I'll break this sometimes and place a stair like that. And it just kind of cleans up the edges a little bit nicer. So let's go ahead and do this to the entire cliff. A small and easy trick that you can go along with doing in an area that the wall looks a little bit flat is just break a few blocks like that. Then go in, replace the dirt with some stone. Then you can bring an upside down stair right there and a normal stair like that. And also when you go along doing stuff like this, it adds a lot more depth to your cliffside. But as you guys can see, the cliffside is definitely starting to come together. There's just a few small little changes that we can do to it just to really make it stand out. One of those small things that we can improve on with this cliff is adding some texture to it. So what I like to do is maybe grab some andesite or gravel because they match stone pretty well, and just bring them in and kind of place them around. When it comes to gravel, I like to place it in clumps just because of the type of block it is, and then when it comes to andesite, I kind of just place it throughout the entire cliff. Now for andesite, that should be plenty enough. We don't want to bring too much in where it distracts the eye, and we also want to save some room for the gravel. And as you guys can see, the andesite is placed around kind of evenly throughout the entire cliff, but the gravel is placed in clumps. Now the other small thing that could definitely use some work is the top of the cliff. If you look at the top of the cliff, there's an extremely harsh line that runs the entire length of the cliff, besides the edges that come down a little bit. But we don't need to worry about those. We just need to worry about this right here. Now for me, the best way to overcome this is just kind of bring some grass out to the edge like that and have it overhang. So something a little bit like that is a perfect example, but there's still this harsh line on the top. And to overcome this, we'll just place some grass on top of the grass we already placed just to add a little bit of a rounded edge. And that right there looks pretty nice. And another thing we can do is actually bring in some coarse dirt, as you guys can see I've done, and just kind of carry it down just a little bit. Not too much though, because we don't want it to take away from the stone in the cliff. And every once in a while, you can bring 1 or 2 blocks down a little bit further just to add a little bit more detail. And maybe even to show that some of this dirt over time has kind of fallen down and built up on the side of the walls. And just like that, we have some dirt that hangs over the front side of the cliff, and it's also been blended into the stone. Now the last thing we can do to the cliff is actually go up to the top of it where we just placed all this grass down and just use some bone meal to add some greenery or shrubbery, whichever whichever one you want to call it. Now with the bone meal all placed in and finished up, I decided to take a step back. And from back here, you can really see how unique this cliff is starting to look. As we come up to it, it's clear to the eye that this is one of a kind and you're not going to find it anywhere else in the world. It may not be very tall, but it is definitely dramatic. And if you want it to be taller, you can do this on any scale that you want to do it on. It might just take a little bit longer. Now moving on from the cliff, the next thing I want to add is a little bit of a river. My thought is we can do a little bit of a waterfall kind of running down the side of the cliff into the river, and then it runs all the way down to the even bigger river. When building rivers, it's good to keep in mind to have everything kind of connect up to a central area. Since we're higher up than the waterbed down there, it makes sense for it to kind of run down the side of this area all the way down into it. And if you really want to go crazy, you can even do a water cave that you can take a boat down and make it all the way down to the ocean on this side. Now obviously every world is a little bit different and mine is obviously going to look different than yours, but it's just ideas to keep in mind. So first things first, I'm just going to kind of go along here and put a little bit of a gouge in the ground to give us a baseline for what the shape of this river is going to look like. And to be honest, I am pretty happy with the shape of that. So now I'm just going to expand this thing out a little bit and go a few blocks further down just so the waterbed isn't only one layer thick. So I've cleared out the area where the little river is going to run through, or I guess kind of a big river. Ended up being a little bigger than I expected, but that's okay. I think it's going to look just fine. So the next step would be to replace all this grass and dirt with gravel and stone, and a good amount of coarse dirt. So I'm just kind of spam clicking around the area, getting rid of any dirt that there is, and also just breaking some stone, and anything that breaks is where some gravel and some coarse dirt is going to go. So now I'm just going through breaking some more blocks, and this is where the gravel is going to go. And so that right there is what the bed of the river is going to look like. So now we're going to move up a little bit and work on the side walls of it. On this part, you'll definitely see some dirt and grass mixed into it, but you'll also see some stone, gravel, and maybe a little bit of coarse dirt. So I'm just going to use the same technique I was using before by just randomly breaking blocks and placing blocks, and I'm going to do this on the whole length of the river. And just like that, the entire bed of the river and the walls are completely textured and ready to go. Now all this thing needs is to be filled with water. And when it comes to filling something like this, especially in survival, it's pretty easy. You just kind of want to place water along every single edge of the river. And once you get to a certain point, the entire thing will turn into full water sources. A little bit something like this. Now that the water is all filled in, we can add a little bit more detail by going under the water and taking some bone meal and adding some seagrass. Seagrass is one of those things that I'm super happy that they added to the game because it adds so much more detail to rivers and lakes. And we can even go through and add a little bit of kelp, just because it adds a little bit more of that sweet detail. So I've gone through and added some kelp throughout the entire river. Also, along the edges of the river, I added some coarse dirt and some rooted dirt. Besides that though, when you look at the river, it looks pretty flat. Well, I mean, it's completely flat and there's no action going on. So we need to add a little bit of action. So to add some action and life to this river, I'm going to add in a little bit of a waterfall. I'm thinking I'm going to do it right about here, and it's kind of going to run down this wall and then off to the side into the river. So before I place in any of the water, I'm actually going to form down here because you want to make it look like the water's been running for thousands of years. Really make it look like the water's been eating up the terrain around it. And just like that, the area looks like it's been deteriorated by water over a long period. So now we just got to add in that water. So I'm going to place some right there, just kind of see where it goes. Do it piece by piece at a time, because the last thing we want is ending up with a giant mess. So I got the water all placed in, and honestly, I really like how that looks. The only thing is Minecraft waterfalls don't really look like they're coming to life too much. All there really is this little bit of animation going down the side of the water block. So what we can do is add some white stained glass panes. So what we can do is actually come down here, place a block, and then place a pane on top of it and break that block. And if we do this around the entire base of the waterfall, it looks like the water's coming down, splashing, and creating some whitewash. Now when doing the glass panes, it's a little bit of a stretch because it doesn't look super great from close up, but if we take a step back, it looks a lot nicer. And honestly, we can even add some more glass panes, but I'm just gonna leave it like this for now. Another cool little trick you can do is place some mossy cobble around the waterfall. I mean, you gotta think, in real life, there's moss growing on all the stone around a waterfall, but we wanna remember not to add too much of it. So that right there should be plenty enough. We really only want the mossy cobble to be located around the area where the water is rushing by. Next up is the land around the river, like right here, is very flat, and we don't want this. So like I said earlier, when we removed all those blocks and flattened this area out, these blocks are going to be coming back. So we just kind of want to come through and add some raised grounds like this right here. You're going to have to break some of your precious work that you did on this cliffside, but it's all right because it all is going to look a lot better in the end. With some areas of raised grass added in, now we can go through with a little bit of bone meal and a flower of your choice. It can look really nice when you just use a single type of flower because you can make it look like it only comes from this area. So we can just go through, spam a few of these around, and then we come through with our bone meal. We really want to make it look like this grass is totally overgrown from all the water it gets buckets from the river. And now we actually have some true shrubbery and flowers growing around this beautiful little river. Whoops, I almost forgot the lily pads. Now the only thing when making a custom river, if you're not starting with a small one already, is no fish are gonna spawn. So what I'm gonna do since I'm in creative is grab a bucket of tropical fish and just go around placing a few of these guys down. But if you are in survival, you're just gonna have to do it the hard way, get a ton of buckets, go down to the local river and collect these guys up. And for the tropical fish, you're gonna have to head out to a reef. So now we're at the point where we have a nice little cliff with a river next to it with some fish swimming in it and tons of shrubbery around this guy, and even a waterfall. With the point we're at, some people might just call the job finished, but I'm not gonna do that. I still wanna add a few custom trees to really make this area stand out. When it comes to custom trees, there's a few different trees I like to build, but my favorite kinda looks like a spruce tree. The main blocks I'm gonna be using are all spruce blocks. Spruce stairs, stripped spruce wood, spruce slab, and some spruce fence. And for the leaves, we're gonna be using birch leaves. Usually when I'm building this spruce tree, there's another tree I build that is pretty much the exact same thing, just a little smaller and uses a few different blocks. Instead of all spruce blocks, we're gonna be using birch blocks, and for the leaves, it's gonna be spruce leaves. So instead of building a bunch of custom trees, I decided just to build one more to show you guys what it could look like. Now in your guys' world, you can do as many as you want, and there's nothing wrong with a bunch of custom trees. They make everything look so much better. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching today's video. Hope you guys learned something and can add it to your worlds. And if you guys wanna see more of this, just let me know down in the comments. But I will see you guys in the next one.